Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Sin and Tonic. Today's story is that of the Bus Stop Stalker. Say that quick. Also known as Levi Bellfield. It's been a while since I covered a serial killer, so let's go. Sin and Tonic! Today's story takes place in southwest London. In 2002, a string of attacks and murders would begin to take place, and they all involved young blonde women. The first attack was on the 21st of March in 2002, and the victim was a Milly Dowler. She was a 13-year-old schoolgirl and she was on her way home from school. On her journey home that day, she met a girl at a bus stop that she knew, and they had a chat, and from all of the things that the police could put together in their investigation, what they found was that between 8 minutes past 4 and 10 past 4 minutes past 4, she just disappeared. And it really was like, she was gone. It was a huge case. A 13-year-old schoolgirl in southwest London had just disappeared off the face of the planet, and a search would begin pretty quickly. Very, very sadly, 6 months after she went missing, the remains of Milly Dowler were discovered 30 miles away, approximately, in a woodland area. And, frustratingly, there was no forensic evidence. Her body remains at this point, so there was not a lot to go on at all. So that's so sad. She just disappeared, and then 6 months later, her remains were found in this woodland. Moving on to February 2003, a young woman called Marsha Mcdonald, she was 18, she had been out with some friends at the cinema, and she was on her way home. She was on a bus. She got off the bus at about midnight, and when she was only 10 doors away from being home, how tragic is that? 10 doors away from being home, she was beaten around the head with something heavy. I don't believe at this point the two cases were linked, Milly Dowler and Marsha Mcdonald. It felt like the attack on Marsha was a blitz attack. It was a random attack on a young woman. Again, there was not a lot to go on. There was no forensic evidence. I do apologise if I'm a bit blinky today. I poked myself in the eye just before I started filming, just for fun. So it's really annoying, and I'm trying desperately not to lose my contact lens, because if I give it a good my lens might fall out and then I'll be in trouble. I'd have to do the rest of the video like this. I don't know. 2004 would bring another attack, and it is chilling. I listened to the audio of when this girl called for help, 999, and it's like you can't even really believe. Anyway, I'll tell you. This victim was Kate Sheedy. As she was walking home, she noticed a white Toyota minivan, with like blacked out windows, like a people carrier sort of affair, like a family car. And she would say later on she survived her attack, surprisingly. But she would say later on that this car just gave her a really bad feeling. She had a bad feeling. And as she was walking past, the engine was running and it sort of did a U-turn in the road and it ran her over. It properly ran her over. It gets worse. I can't even. It runs over this poor girl, and then he reversed back over her again. That is horrific. So you've been run over and you are laying there hurt and in pain and upset, and then it reverses over you again. What? Okay. Like that I was like, oh. And then the reason why I say that the call is heartbreaking is because every rib was broken. Her spleen was damaged, and she had a punctured lung. If you want to, you may listen to the call. I think it's on YouTube, if you want to. I did, and I can't unhear it. Sadly, the list continues. Later on that year, in August of 2004, a French student, she was out with friends at a wine bar, and they'd had a few wines, having a nice time, and then she was on her way home. Oh, apologies. Her name was Amélie Della Delagrange is French. I hope that was correct. Delagrange, I think. She decided at 9:30 to leave the wine bar and go home, and she got on a bus. And tragically, it would turn out, she missed her stop. So for whatever reason, maybe it was a few wines, maybe she was having a daydream, maybe she fell asleep, but she missed her bus stop. And so when she realised that she was wrong, she spoke to the bus driver and he said, just cross over the road and in 10 minutes another bus will come along that direction and you can then get to your correct stop. But it was a really nice, warm August evening, so she decided to walk the rest of the way home. And this decision would prove fatal for Amelie. Again, not far from home, she was attacked. She was beaten over the head with something heavy. She was found by another student, who at first thought she was just passed out, like too much to drink, that sort of situation, until he saw the gaping wound in the back of her head. So then he called for an ambulance and she would die later on that evening in hospital. There was a lot of terror at this time, as you can imagine. Somebody is just going around murdering young, blonde women, seemingly for no reason. So that is not the one, is it? Oh, I just suddenly got a flush. Maybe it's the gin. Maybe. It's not my favourite gin, I'm going to be honest. This is not my favourite, is it? I mean, I've got a winky eye where I've poked myself in it, and a gin that I'm not really enjoying that much. Come on! It's a bit like... It's just... I can't even think of a descriptive word for it. It's just... Just nothingy. I'll persist. So a lot of terror, a lot of fear. However, at this point, when they were investigating the murder of Amelie, they noticed in CCTV a white van, a small white van, I'll share a picture if I can, driving around the area at a similar time to the attack. So this piqued their interest, and what they did is they sort of expanded their search on the CCTV cameras, and they kept seeing this van driving around. Suspicious. They looked into the van and they found it was registered to somebody called Levi Bellfield. And it was for the purposes of wheel clamping. What a job. No one's friend. Where do I begin with Levi? Because there's a lot to him. Not good. They began delving into the depths of the horror that is Levi Bellfield. And what they found was not pretty. Levi Bellfield, I think I'm going to call him Bellfield. Bellfield was a violent man, horribly violent man. He had 4 wives, not all at once, like one after another. And he would beat and emotionally abuse all of them. Oh, he was just vile. He would bite them. Lovely. In 2003, Levi would end up putting a friend of his, this is how he treats his friends, Pete Rodriguez, oh my gosh, I really struggle saying that surname. Rodriguez. That, I'm so sorry. I can never do that. He ended up putting Pete in hospital. Awfully, he was lucky to survive. They had a falling out. He invited Pete back to his flat, I believe, and they had this row, and Pete went to leave. So Pete went to go downstairs, and this Pete, he was somebody that had always really been very close with Bellfield. He would describe him as the older brother that he never had. So they, in his opinion, they were great friends. This is what I'm saying. This is how he treats his friend, his best friend, the older brother. This situation is... They had a row and he followed Pete downstairs, and all Pete can remember is going down the stairs and then about 6 weeks later waking up in hospital. Turns out he had followed Pete downstairs with a mallet, massive big old mallet, and beaten Pete over the head with it numerous times. So that's attempted murder, isn't it? I struggle with how things didn't go badly for Bellfield at this point. But okay, it gets worse. It just gets darker. He then went to the hospital where Pete is laying like in intensive care on life support, and he tries to visit Pete. And luckily the staff at the hospital were a bit like, what's going on? He said he was Pete's brother. Really? And in fact, he was there to turn Pete's life support machine off. He was just trying to kill him, like get him gone, completely gone. What the hell? Crazy. So anyway, he didn't get in. He didn't get to see Pete. Luckily, because he would have killed him. And yeah, nothing came of it. Nothing came because there was a lack of evidence. But surely, did Pete not say? I mean, it blows my mind. I guess you can't just say that someone did something. I don't know. But nothing came of it. Turns out Pete was very good at not being caught for things and getting away with a lot. And he was also very good at not leaving any physical forensic evidence. So Pete had also been a bouncer. And between 1995 and 2001, many girls, some young women, but many girls between the ages of 14 and 17 would come forward and report report Bellfield for rape, sexual abuse, attacking them. And all of the time there was just a lack of evidence. What he would do, dirtbag, he had a van and he would put a mattress. I mean, you're going to such... He would put a mattress in the back of this van. He would lure young girls into this van or drug them. Sometimes he would entice them with drugs and alcohol, but sometimes he would just drug them and then rape them in the back of his van. No evidence. Levi was a troubled soul, to say the least, and when you look back into his life a little bit, you can see some interesting things. So he was very small in stature when he was a young lad, and this really, he didn't like it at all, and he was bullied for it, and he was bullied by a group of girls as well. So what they think is that he developed a hatred, like a really strong hatred for girls, young women, and that was like, you know, it was a deep-pitted rage and anger, and yeah, he didn't like them. His ex-wife, I think his second wife, would say that he in particular had a big hatred towards blonde girls and young women. He never expressed why to her or anything like that, but it was known that he was bullied by girls when he was younger for his small stature, and perhaps they were all blonde or something like that. That is just my speculation, but perhaps that was the case. Or maybe there was one particular horrible, nasty bully that was a blonde girl, and it just like really got in there, and he just hated young blonde women and girls. Not an excuse to go around running them over with your frickin' people carrier, love. But yeah, so that was like the psychology around what they believe kind of triggered this all off. To make the rage even more ragey, because of the small stature thing, he then, when he sort of grew up and left school and everything, he then started taking steroids and was like, he got beefy. And he just wanted to leave the small stature Levi behind, and he became another person, but he became a very angry, nasty piece of work with a deep hatred of women. What a pot, what a concoction. That's not looking good, is it? What's that saying? Hurt people hurt people? 100%. That is normally always the case, isn't it, with these murderers? Now, Pete, his friend, that I was going to say malleted. I don't think that's a word. The guy that he beat with a mallet. While he was recovering in hospital, he becomes a bit sort of like Miss Marple. And he, like, you know, there's not a lot to do, is there, in hospital? So he's like reading the newspapers, and he's remembering things in the past as well. And he starts to kind of think, like, you know, all of these attacks on these young blonde women and Milly Dowler are all in places that Levi is very, very familiar with. He even looked at a map and was like, yeah, just connected that these were all, you know, familiar places to Levi, that he had a connection with all of these places. Please note. hate that though, because it just it's against me. Oh, mother. Okay, that'll do. Pete was not the only person whose suspicions were raised. No. Bellfield's ex-wife, I believe the second ex-wife, she started to have her own thoughts about all of these cases, and she started to worry that he was involved. The main thing was the white people carrier. So they released an appeal out to the public about this white people carrier at the time of Kate Sheedy's attack. This ex-wife called a friend of Levi's and said, does he still have the white people carrier with the blacked out windows? And it piqued her suspicion. Not only was Bellfield a wheel clamper at this time, but he also got into the business of buying and selling cars. He also handily had access to one of those, like, you know, where you go and destroy cars. You don't. I think it's like, you know, like an impound, that sort of thing. So he had access to that as well. But he also had access to different vehicles, not just his own. And at the time, his second ex-wife knew that he had in his possession this white minivan Toyota with blacked out windows. And that was confirmed by this friend, whoever she called. They said, yeah, he's still got it. And then she also knew that Bellfield actually had a connection with the place where Milly Dowler's body had been found. She owned horses and she did like horse jumping. I don't know what that's called. That's probably got a name. And when they were married, when they were together, she would go to this place, showground. I don't know these words. But she would go there with her horses to jump the horses, have a good time. And her and Bellfield, he would take their dogs for a walk in that woodland. So the woodland where Milly Dowler's body was found was well known to Bellfield. And she knew that. So she knew that, and she knew about the people carrier. This information was just too much for her to know, and so she did go to the police and she told them what she knew and her suspicions. And the clincher for the police was when she confirmed that Levi Bellfield was currently a wheel clamper and that he drove a small white van, tightening the net on Levi Bellfield. What they did next was, like, you know, out of what do you call it? Like police TV shows and stuff. They put him under surveillance. I know that this really happens, but to me, it's just so like TV star Hollywood sort of thing. Whee! But I'm not making light of it. But I just think, oh my God, I can't believe that that really happens. And you know, like kids that want to be police officers and detectives, they probably like imagine that. And then one day they're just sitting in a car on surveillance. It's probably really, really freaking boring and such an anticlimax. But nevertheless, there must be a moment when they're like, I'm doing it. And then they need to pee. After watching Bellfield behave in a very shady manner towards two young girls at a bus stop, the police swoop in. And they go to where he's living and he's naked. So they go to arrest him and he buggers off, he runs, he tries to hide, and he goes in the loft. Naked in the loft. You know, like attic if you're in America, I guess, because I know lots of you are in America. And we call it a loft or an attic, but, you know, an attic. So he's gone up there and he's hidden underneath a layer of insulation. Loft insulation. Oh my gosh, that stuff is itchy. I'm so glad he did that though, because I hope it itched for a long, long time. I hope they didn't let him take a shower. That is at least he deserved. When they remove Levi from his itchy nest in the loft, he's arrested. And he is charged with the murders of Amelie, Marsha, and the attempted murder of Kate. In all of his interviews, no comment. He was found guilty and he was sent to prison for life. It doesn't end there. 2 years into his sentence, the investigating officer on the Milly Dowler case has another look into all of the evidence, and he starts to piece together that this really could have been committed by Levi Bellfield. He is re-interviewed, and The third wife of Levi Bellfield comes forward and says that the day after Milly Dowler went missing, she found Levi stripping a bed in their home, stripping the sheets. Now, she said it was unusual and she remembers it vividly because this is a guy that does not do housework. He said that one of their dogs had had an accident on the bed and that's why he was stripping the bed, but it was very suspect behaviour. They also found that on the day that Millie went missing, Bellfield turned his phone off for a big old chunk of the day. So he knew that if his phone was off, they wouldn't be able to track and see his movements that day. Suspicious. Also, on the day that Millie went missing, they discovered that Bellfield was driving a friend's car. So he was driving a car that was not registered to him at all. And then, just remarkably, this car then gets stolen. So he never gives the car back to his friend, and what they believe happened is that he took it to the crushy place that he knows about, and he got rid of all of the evidence, basically. It took 6 years to gather enough evidence to bring Bellfield to trial for Milly Dowler's abduction and murder. But they did. Bellfield was convicted of the murder of Milly Dowler in 2010, and he was the first person in the UK to be given 2 whole life tariffs, because one was not enough for this evil man. This was a hefty case, and there was a lot more that I could research because there was a scandal as well, a media scandal, where the News of the World, I believe, they hacked Millie's phone when she was missing, before they knew that she'd been murdered. They hacked into her phone, and I think what I read, I didn't go too deep because I had been I was down a rabbit hole, and I was like, I need to go to bed. And yeah, it was too much. So yeah, they hacked her phone and were listening to like voicemails and, what's it called? A voicemail. Is that what it is? That, if someone doesn't answer the phone, oh my God. Anyway, they were listening to her voicemails and stuff like this. Not only that, the feckers, but they were then deleting possible evidence, like possible voice notes, mails. They were deleting some to make room for new ones. What the hell? Honestly, I think her parents took them to trial, sued them for like 2 million in damages or something like that, because what an invasion of privacy. And I think there's a lot more to that. I think it was like, oh, I nearly pulled you over. I'm so sorry. Where was I? Yeah, like I say, I think there was a lot more. That was quite in depth, but at the end of the day, naughty. And this is where it gets spicy. Can you believe it? If you've made it to this point in the video, and now I'm just saying it's getting spicy, what the deuce? So this year, right? Well, in 2017 and this year, Levi Bellfield has confessed in like a big old letter to the 1996 murders of Lynn and Megan Russell. That is a case in itself, and I'm seriously, I'm not going to cover that case until more of this has come to light, because there is a man called Michael Stone who is currently serving a full life sentence for their murders. Okay, so that's like, whoa. Yet Bellfield has now confessed to their murders. It is a horrific crime, and I don't normally cover crimes with children, and I remember reading about this case before I even did Sin and Tonic and just thinking, oh my gosh, that is just, it's stuff of nightmares. But I do think there's something to it if something comes out that, I mean, if Michael Stone, who is serving life for this crime, is innocent, I mean, that's a biggie. That is a biggie. So I will bring you more on that as and when I know, because there is concerns that Bellfield is being paid off by Michael Stone, but I just don't see. I mean, what has he got to... I mean, I just don't... And apparently, in his confession, in his letter, he knows things about the murders of Lynn and Megan that have never been divulged to the public. But then they're both in prison, so could there have been like a sharing of communication? Are they just playing? You know, they could just be playing. They've got nothing else to do. They're both serving life sentences. It's not funny, is it at all, to mess with people like that? But I don't know. Michael Stone has always, you know when you just get filled with dread, because I was like, is it Michael Stone? Have I just made this up? I need to check now. It's Michael Stone. So when I know more, I will update you with that, because I find that really interesting. Why would you confess to something? I don't know. And why now? Fishy. Whatever the motive behind his most recent confession, he's in prison for the rest of his life, and that's where he definitely needs to be. Oh, just realised that my eye doesn't feel quite so bad. And I wasn't like, I thought we were going to be in trouble there. Thought I nearly poked myself in the eye again. Yep, doesn't feel too bad. I've got loads of floaters. It's because I've spent a week staring at a computer screen writing an essay. It's not good for your eye health at all. Not at all. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me today for another episode of Sin and Tonic. I do hope you can join me next week for another true crime story and a glass, mug, vase, jug of gin. And a wide and wonderful thank you to every subscriber, because we are growing in numbers and that's very exciting. Paul and I have got ideas going on all the time about what to do when we hit 1,000. I think at the moment it's going to be Patreon, PO Box and merch. I'm so excited about those three things. I cannot tell you. So, and I think it might, I don't want to estimate and be wrong, but I think it's going to be at around the time that I finish this year of uni. So I'll have headspace and energy to just flow into those projects. So that's exciting. And even if I don't, I'm going to anyway. So yeah. Right. Considering I didn't like the gin, I've not done too badly. I'm going to go in and get my pyjamas on and a hot water bottle. I love you. And I will see you all next week for another story and a gin. Bye.